this is my knife. This knife was designed by the United States Air Force, and the blade is virtually undullable. It is made of Japanese steel, okay? Japanese steel, if you could ask any chef, you could ask any swordsman, you could ask any knife enthusiast, it's pretty much the best steel you could get. Now, I'm illustrating a point, no pun intended, with this knife. That we had a war with Japan, a brutal war, a propaganda war. We were bitter enemies not too long ago, a little more than half a century ago. And there's one thing that has created this continued peace after the war, after Japan brutalized our soldiers and our allies, and we brutalized them. And that one thing is trade. We want your Japanese steel. You want our blue jeans and rock and roll. I think we could come to an agreement, a business agreement. And the Japanese are really good businessmen. And they came to this understanding with the Western world. And they said, hey, wait, why spend the rest of our lives fighting the Western world where we could have this mutually beneficial relationship? If that relationship never happened, we would not be able to make this knife, for the United States Air Force, by the way, it's a paratrooper knife. Out of the best steel ever, we'd have to use the second best. And the United States doesn't like to use second best of anything. That's in our history, before we were even a country. That's been in our history. Because I want to talk a little bit today about the history between the West and Native Americans before there was a United States. Now, the controlling narrative at the moment, if you go to college, is basically that Europeans came to the New World and just killed every Indian they saw. They brutalized all the Indians. They raped their women. They killed their babies. They murdered them. They stole all their land. They took it for themselves, and they just laughed as everybody died. Not true. There were definitely wars. There was definitely war crimes. Anything that historically could be considered war crimes. There was definitely cruelty. There was definitely prejudice. There was definitely all these terrible things. My God. It's almost like they were acting like people from the 15th century or something. We look at things like Native American relationships with Europeans before, the United States was created. And we look at that as, through the lens of 2018 or millennial eyes or whatever. And we act like, how come they didn't just know to come here and be awesome to everybody and have a great relationship and do this and do that? And it's, okay, very simple. Why, when Columbus came here, why did he take the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria? Why didn't he fly into LaGuardia? Why didn't he fly into JFK? It's stupid. What is he, an idiot? Why didn't he just hop on a plane to fly? Because he needed to take the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria in rickety wooden boats across an ocean for there to be a LaGuardia, for there to be a JFK. It's a sequence of events. It's evolution. It's sociology, human sociology, and development of who we are as a people. Now, the reason why we were interested in the Native Americans, as far as when I say we, I mean the Western world, and at the time, the baby pictures of the Western world, just because it was like expansionism and things that like, it was Europeans expanding into new cultures and into new territories, right? And what ended up happening was, we wanted to trade. That's why Columbus wanted to go to Asia and he wanted to go to India and find that route to trade. He didn't go, when we're going to go there and murder every last brown person we see. He said, we want to go and trade. They were excited to see the people of the New World, the Indians, which, Columbus didn't even know where he was. What, did that idiot not even look at a map? He was so stupid. It's like, no, he was a guy who was seeing something that was unfamiliar and uncommon to the European world at the time, not even really the Western world, because really what the Western world is in the modern sense is basically the ideas that the United States brought to the world. Europeans aren't going to like that, but it's true. You could say, well, you know, you were based on English law. Yeah, I guess we were, but you know what we did? We made it better. We made it way better. We made it way freer, and we made it way more of an awesome place for people to come and thrive no matter what walk of life they were, because we didn't have all these lords and kings left over from the medieval period kneeling and bowing to each other. We just said, hey, man, if a guy has a good idea and knows how to make money with it, cool, bring him up. He's one of ours. Great. That was a revolutionary idea. Hey, if a guy wants to speak his mind, if people want to listen, let him speak his mind. Let's see what happens. That's a revolutionary. You want to talk about a revolution when communists talk about what revolutionaries they are? You're not revolutionary. Stifling people's ideas aren't revolutionary. What was revolutionary was free thought and free expression, but I digress. We're talking about Native Americans. So we wanted to trade. One of the things we traded was horses. You could read all this in the book Guns, Germs, and Steel. Horses and these animals that American Indians were unfamiliar with spread disease, which killed off 90% of the occupants of continental United States. Never mind South America, never mind the islands, never mind all this. It's a much more nuanced and complicated history than, you know, the Europeans came here and they just slaughtered everyone they could find. In many cases, Europeans had superior weapons, right? Well, you think that American Indians and Native Americans and whoever weren't skirmishing with people all over the place? So when Europeans come here and they want to settle and they say, hey, we want to live here. Where can we live? Now, I'm simplifying this, but let's pretend that, you know, we kind of have a similar view of territory and property rights and whatnot, okay? Which we kind of didn't, but let's not get into that. What I'm going to get into is there were a lot of tribes that were more than happy to say, oh, you want land? Great. Help us take out the guys up the river, because those guys are real assholes, and we can't stand them. So you could be on our side, and we'll fight them together, and you get rid of them, you chase them away, you know, do whatever the spoils of war is. You get to take what they have, whether it's, you know, food or land, which in this case it was a lot of territory. So Europeans of all stripes, who by the way hated each other, the English and the French hated each other. You know, the Spanish, Portuguese hated each other. This is all in history books. And I know that it all boils down to, if you go to college today, it all boils, or if you watch Vox today, it all basically boils down to, for them, that it was white people versus Indians. That is the furthest thing from the truth. It was some countries of white people aligning with tribes of Indians and Native Americans, whatever you'd like to call them, fighting other tribes of Native Americans and nations of white people to try and one-up each other on trade routes and land and whatnot, okay? So in the midst of this, there were wars, and disease was breaking out all over the place. Smallpox was destroying. The plague, basically the bubonic plague, was sweeping continental U.S., and then Native Americans would flee to further territories to get away from the disease and, in effect, spread the disease. People call this a genocide. I hear this every Columbus Day, every Thanksgiving. Genocide, genocide. Oh my God, 90% of them died. Genocide. Blankets. Well, the blanket thing is a myth. I'll prove it to you right now. Germ theory didn't come into existence. We didn't really come to understand germs and popularize, oh, these microscopic organisms are infecting us, till about 1870. Well, Columbus showed up in 1492. And then in the 1500s, there was all these conquests. Hundreds of years went by. That whole time, you know what they thought if somebody got sick? They thought it was fucking ghosts, because everyone was fucking stupid. And they weren't stupid because they were stupid people. They were stupid because they haven't evolved yet to learn the things that we learned with science. So they would just go, oh God, God is smiting them. And oh my God, ghosts are taking over, evil spirits, vampires, werewolves, something. Because they couldn't comprehend microscopic organisms are infecting you. And our immune system is more accustomed to being around horses, and theirs isn't. And that must be what's causing it. No one theorized that. No one. No one in 1580 thought that, let alone the 1600s, let alone the 1700s, let alone most of the 1800s, and that really affected the American Indian population. If you're going to call that a genocide, in all fairness, if you're going to call that a genocide, then you're going to have to call the American Indians giving us syphilis and tobacco a genocide, because that's killed a lot of European people of European heritage, right? When I say us, I don't mean the United States. I mean people of European heritage, because I have European heritage. Now, the thing is this. It wasn't a thing of like, we resent your culture. In many cases, when Europeans showed up, they thought the culture was beautiful. They were like, oh my God, they were breathtaking and amazed, and they got along with people. Ferdinand Magellan got along with American Indians. I mean, Jesus Christ, think about it. Most of the people at the time were illiterate. Most of the people at the time were drunk, because they couldn't really, water would actually, if you let water sit too long, you'll get rat piss in it, you'll get disease from the water, but you could drink alcohol all you want. And a lot of them were 17, 16, 18-year-old kids who've never gotten laid, and they show up on some island paradise in South America with these naked American Indian women swimming towards the boats, or whatever, Indian women, they're not American Indian, Brazilian natives, whatever, swimming towards the boats to greet them. Jesus Christ, what, you're going to go, let's murder them all? No, they went, this is amazing. They didn't want to leave, and they pressed on. And then they pressed their luck, because they kept making alliances in local politics in different islands and whatnot. They ended up in the Philippines. Magellan ended up being macheted to death in knee-deep turquoise water, which just ran red with blood, because he made the wrong move. His men were getting irritated. He didn't have the backing of a lot of the guys that he was with. And, he was pissing off a lot of the native tribes up there too. So what I'm saying is that there is no culture. There is no, like, when I say culture, I mean there's no people of a certain DNA in this context. That's how I'm using culture. Whether it's American Indians or people in the Philippines at the time who were the natives, it's not like you would look at that person's skin and go, I'm better than you, but your technology might be better than that person. And they might have food or supplies or something that you want to trade. And in a lot of cases, that was the only thing keeping the peace, right? And that was the thing that made them go, okay, well, we're trading. It wasn't all just rape and conquest, because there was plenty of American Indians who didn't get on the good side of the Europeans at the time, in the context of that time, hundreds of years ago, because part of the thing was, well, we could just take whatever you have. If you have something, we share. And, if he has something, I'm allowed to grab it and take it, and that thing's mine now. Or that thing's everybody's now, which is not a concept that Europeans were very comfortable with. So does that mean that they were these awful, filthy thieves? Well, it's the context of the time. Not really, but I could see how that could be off-putting if I move into a new neighborhood and all my neighbors come in and they just start taking my stuff. Or if I, stop at a rest stop and I go outside and I see a bunch of people jimmying open the doors of my car and taking my bags and taking my GPS and running away with it, I might not feel too great about those people, and I might be a little resentful towards them. And you might, if you come from a violent culture, like how Spain was and Portugal was and France was and England was, and the European cultures had to fight and scrap against, by the way, against the Moors and against Islamic invasions for hundreds of years at this point. And that's how they developed that kind of attitude, right? So what I'm getting at, the point of this is history is a lot more nuanced, and it wasn't as simple as American Indians just all, we thought we were superior when it comes to white people, and white people just walked through and kicked them in the face and threw sand at them and took their women and killed them. They did horrible things. A lot of that happened. A lot of just conquests happened, right? But shouldn't the individual nation and country be responsible for that? Should it be somebody just because of the color of their skin? Should they be responsible for that? And if that's the case, how come, for example, we don't blame Puerto Ricans for being of Spanish descent? For some reason, they fall into the, well, no, you're an ethnic minority, so you're cool. However, you're probably the great-great-great-great-grandsons and daughters of conquistadors, to be honest with you. That was the first area that was settled was the Caribbean, where Spanish ships were coming and opening up trade routes and doing all this sort of stuff that was done back in the day with wooden ships and showing, hey, we got this, give us one of those, and we're good to go. And it was just, if you think about it, it was just like now. So let's flash forward to the United States and their relationship with the American Indians, because the United States will always be blamed for horrible things that happen to the American Indians, and there's no escaping it. It's in the past of the United States that, you know, not everything that happened with Native Americans was good. Well, to explain that, once again, I'm doing this really briefly. I'm doing this as somebody who just kind of celebrates and likes history and learning about the little relationships and nuances, and doesn't just react and go, white people versus red people, and the white people were just so cruel and mean and terrible to these nice, peaceful hippies. It wasn't like that. What happened was there was a war called the French and Indian War, a couple decades before the American Revolution, okay? That was a lot of American Indian tribes aligning with the French to help them fight their war with England. Some other tribes aligned with England, right? You're following me. I know you are. Who won the French and Indian War? The British. What that meant was, through the spoils of war, those American Indian tribes that aligned with the French at the time lost their territory. That was a consequence of aligning with the loser of that particular major conflict that cost France virtually all of North America. Okay? Then, flash forward a few decades. You have another war that nobody expected to happen called the American Revolution. Now, you had a bunch of Indians that were left over from the French and Indian War, Indian tribes and whatnot, and some of them aligned with the Continental Army, the United States. Others, the other ones who were still loyal to the British, who were enjoying the spoils of war at the time, in the context of, keep in mind, the 1700s, but they were enjoying the spoils of war. American Indians, the white man, were all living side by side, right? It wasn't like every time you saw an Indian, you sneered and wanted to slap him across the face. You know, if you're a white guy, and if you were an Indian, you didn't just go, you stole my land. It wasn't like that. I truly believe, from everything I've read in every history book that I've read, that it wasn't like that. There were definitely relationships between American Indians and European settlers that were, you know, what's the word? Acclimatable? That's not a word. So what it is everybody was, there were definitely alliances and people who understood each other, and it wasn't just all racism. There was a lot more tribalism. There was a lot more, but that was with everything. You know, you go to the Methodist church, well, I go to the Lutheran church. You know, there was, you know, I forget who said it, but America was a nation of clubs. And that's what it was, whether it was your church, whether it was a men's club that you had, whether it was, you know, a fraternal order that you belonged to, or you went to this college and that guy went to that college, or I'm French and you're English. There was all these little alliances, and if you were French, you could possibly get along with Spaniards or British people if you had a relationship through trade and acceptable commerce and interaction, where it's like, well, I need that guy to shop at my store. He needs to buy my furs, so I'm going to be nice to him. I'm not going to cut his head off when I see him. Again, this is in the context of hundreds of years ago. And this was everybody. It was all peoples. There was no perfect people ever. There was no peaceful hippie people who just got the rawest of the raw deal. And American Indian tribes themselves, anytime somebody says the Indians, I always come back and I say, which ones? Which ones? Because one tribe was different than the last, and American Indian tribes at the time were as diverse as any countries in Europe were. I mean, the Pueblo and Mohawk Indians had virtually nothing in common, right? I think we could agree on that. All you got to do is look at pictures of their dress, see what their houses look like, see how they lived. They weren't like, well, we both have red skin, so we all love each other. There were people who lived next door to each other in the American Indian world that were murdering each other all the time. There were people there were tribes that only provided for their own tribe by raids, which meant you showed up somewhere at somebody's house, killed everyone you saw, and took their shit. Okay, does that sound like harmony and beauty and peaceful? No, there would have been wars and conflicts no matter what. What happened was adding the ingredient of advanced technology with, you know, European settlers just kind of expedited a lot of things, and it kind of shook up the whole game board, and it made everything now, all the rules have changed. So anyway, getting back to the American Revolution. So you have the bulk of the Indians now, the ones who won in the French and Indian War, who were enjoying the spoils of war and got whatever was agreed to them by the English. Well, a couple short decades later, the English said, join us. And a lot of American Indian tribes joined the English. How did that work out for them? Pretty bad. They lost, right? That's why we have an America. So at the time, keep in mind, you had a bunch of American Indian tribes who just lost the French and Indian War. Some of them aligned. Some of them moved out of the territory. Some more of them aligned with the Continental Army, the American Army led by Washington. And the bulk of them aligned with the British. The ones that already won aligned with the British. So in effect, you had pretty much every American Indian tribe just lose two major territorial wars in the span of a few decades. And to me, no one talks about it in the context like that, right? No one talks about it in the context of that's how borders change, that's how things change, that's how, stuff happens. And then now it gets simplified to the white man betrayed us. We were promised this land and the white man betrayed us. Well, no, you got involved in two major wars with these warring nations who had, technological advances and stuff that they wanted. And a big thing that the American Indians wanted was trade. They said, we like trading with the French. So, of course, we're going to side with these guys and stop these other guys because we don't like trading with them as much. And then there was other people saying, we hate trading with the French. They're a bunch of assholes. We're siding with these guys. And within a few decades, as America was formed, all these tribes lost control of their territory in what became like the United States territory. We could get into expansionism and all that other shit too, but that's not for this video. I'm just trying to give you a small glimpse into how misunderstood certain things in history are, and how the only thing that brings you peace, really, is trade, is a mutually beneficial economy for each other, where you have no reason to fight each other anymore. Look at, hey, of all the things you criticize about the United States, I think way at the top of the list is our relationship with countries like Saudi Arabia. But why? Why aren't we attacking them? Or why do we get involved in any of their shit? Because of trade, because of oil, because they have things that we want, and we have things that they want. And we might not really have much in common as a culture, but it's in everybody's best interest not to destroy the other one because of trade, which is why you see all these creepy pictures of like presidents holding hands with Saudi princes and smiling at them and, having these conferences. And I think even Trump was putting his hand on a globe not too long ago, a few years ago, and hanging out with all the Saudi royalty and whatnot. It's not because we just love them as people. It's because we have a mutually beneficial relationship. Also, borders change all the time. You would have to agree to say that the American Indians unjustly lost all their land, and this land that we all live on, known as the United States, we should give it back because it's not our land because we weren't here first. To say something like that means that you would have to agree that in 1492, the borders that were as was on the maps at the time were absolutely perfect. That there were no disputes at the time, whether it was the Middle East, Europe, Africa, Asia, or even Native American tribes themselves in continental United States, or what became the United States. You'd have to agree that, no, those borders were picture perfect. Because if we go back to those borders, we'd also have to go back to those disagreements that were happening at the time. And those things that, people argued about, like why they deserve this island, or why they deserve this, or you attacked us and we won, so we deserve your territory over here as part of the agreement to stop the hostilities. There were things like this happening all the time throughout history, back to when we were fighting with sticks. So, moral of the story is, when it comes to history between white settlers and Native Americans, I think it's a lot more nuanced than people give it credit for. And I think that the biggest thing that we should take away from it is we should all relax. You know why? Because American Indians are part of Americana. It's part of our culture. If you see an Indian head penny, or, I had an Indian head like coin belt buckle for a while. You go to the Southwest, you see American Indian influence in the art, in the style of dress and everything from hundreds of years ago, and it's celebrated here. It's celebrated in our football and baseball teams, you know? It's celebrated pretty much as part of the fabric of American culture. We don't turn around and go, no, American culture is just white people. And the only people I notice saying that are liberals. American culture isn't just white people. It's never just been white people. It's always been an amalgamation of the people that were here before us, the people that came here, the people that traded here, and everybody in between. And, you know, I mean, that's the closest I'll get to saying diversity is our strength. But the fact of the matter is, it's undeniable that you could look around America and we were rough, we were gritty, we were loud, we were rude, and Europe did not look kindly on us because of all those things. And we said, nah, we could use our chutzpah, we could use our moxie, we could use our grit, and we can make that into something totally unique. All we have to do is add the ingredient of freedom. And we did. And it wasn't a perfect freedom at first, and it got more perfect as we went along. And we corrected ourselves through a very vague constitution of these are the rules of our club. And the longer time went on where we interpreted the rules of that club and said, wait, but this isn't fair. We have slaves. Wait, but this isn't fair. Women can't vote. The longer times went on, the better and more free this country got. And that's why in 2018, it's as free as it's ever been. People just don't know it.